Whenever a game goes through changes, I have to go through changes too. Destiny 2's Season of Dawn just started, and it brought some huge quality of life improvements and updates to a lot of the game's subclasses. And that means making loadouts for these subclasses is going to be even more exciting than before. For today's video, we're going to do some experimenting with the Titan's Code of the Devastator, or as I like to call it, the Baby Hammer Bro. We're going to try on different exotics, test them out, and talk about why they're effective or why they're ineffective. Let's get started. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do today. We're playing on the Baby Hammer Bro, and I have 4 different exotic armor pieces with me, and I want to try a different one in each of the Lost Sector, and I'm going to talk about the value points that they bring, why I like them, and why I dislike them. We have the Capris Horn, the Synthoceps, the Heart of Inmost Light, and the Dunemarchers. They each provide a different benefit to the Code of the Devastator, and I'm going to start with the Capris Horn because it is my favorite exotic armor piece in the game, because it is super gimmicky and super silly, but it's also surprisingly effective if used correctly. So as I am driving to the Lost Sector, the Capris Horn adds an additional effect to our barricade. When we activate it, it sends out a blast of solar energy that goes forward and then comes back to the barricade. And the interaction that it has with the Code of the Devastator is that it gives us stacks of Roaring Flames. And Roaring Flames increases the damage of our solar abilities. Unfortunately, I don't believe Roaring Flames affects the fire damage from Capris Horn. It does not. So even though the damage of the Capris Horn doesn't increase, it's doing a couple of things for us that are really nice. It's allowing us to maintain our stacks of Roaring Flames with an additional ability. So anytime I press any of my ability buttons and they are used correctly, so when enemies are around, it's going to help me maintain that Roaring Flames ×3, and that's very nice. But another benefit that I'm getting is on my class item, I have 2 enhanced bomber mods. So every time I activate my barricade, which is going to be pretty frequently, I am going to get a chunk of my grenade cooldown reduced. So I'm getting more consistent ability usage because of the Capris Horn. So let's actually get into the Lost Sector and try to flow with this exotic and see how it feels with the Code of the Devastator. Even though the subclass did receive some buffs recently, I've always felt like it was good, but it's super gimmicky, so it's not as good as it should be. And the buffs that were made to it, Roaring Flames, it used to give a damage buff of 20% per stack, and now it gives a damage buff of 30% per stack. So that alone might be enough to make a rather gimmicky subclass feel a little bit stronger. Alright, we're inside the Lost Sector, and it's time to flow with our abilities a little bit. This is my first time playing for the day, so I'm a little bit rusty, and I'm probably going to miss a lot of my ability activations, but I'm going to try my best. So the goal here is going to be to use a mixture of my abilities and my barricade to keep Roaring Flames active as long as possible. And because this is just a Lost Sector, the environment is a little bit easy, so I'm not going to have to worry too much about dying, but it is a nice showcase of just how frequently I can activate my barricade. I should go pick that up. One thing that's pretty important to keep in mind about the throwing hammer is that you shouldn't throw it in a direction that you don't actively want to travel to, because not picking this thing up is a huge detriment to your potential damage output. But so far, we're seeing the obvious benefits of having Capris Horn. We haven't lost Roaring Flames since we got in here, which is nice. Right there, we're moving in this direction so we can get the hammer. But what I haven't been showing off is just how much grenade cooldown reduction I can get from continuously activating the barricade. It's not as potent as something like the effects on the Heart of Inmost Light or the Hollow Fire Heart, but it's still something. Oh no, almost lost my Roaring Flames there. I just want to keep it up as much as possible. But having double enhanced bomber, it feels really nice. I could also switch out one of those enhanced bombers for something like ashes to assets, or if I was using a different class item element, I could use... Hey, stop following me. Stop it. If I was using an arc class item instead of a solar class item, I could use melee-centric mods instead. There's a lot of different things that could go on with the class item and how you set it up. But the Roaring Flames ×3, it feels pretty good. It's doing a lot of damage to the enemies. It's one-shotting the Nightmare Shanks, which is awesome. Capris Horn clears out the red bars very easily. This would definitely be fun in the new seasonal activity because the enemies aren't incredibly powerful. Let's get a sticky grenade on the server. 51,000 damage is what we get for that. That's pretty good. And since we do have Roaring Flames ×3, now is a great time to activate our super and slam it down on the server. Oh. Let's just mash it up. So that felt pretty good. The Capris Horn, it has a nice feel to it for this subclass, but it obviously has its problems. Right there, I sent out the wave of flames, and it completely missed all the targets that I wanted it to hit, and that feels bad. The activation speed of the barricade is definitely the biggest weakness. So if you are fighting an enemy like the Fallen or anything that's strafing around a lot, or something like a Hive Knight that can use the Hunter dodge basically, then taking that 1 second or so to activate the barricade before sending out the attack can make your attack miss, and that's a bit unfortunate. But overall, I always enjoy using the Capris Horn, and I definitely still enjoy it. Now, on the flip side, there is an exotic that I don't enjoy as much, but I'm still going to use it just for the sake of talking about different ways to engage with the subclass. And I'm going to put on this Phoenix Strife Type 0 helmet and put on a resilience mod on it. And the next exotic that I want to use is the Dunemarchers. I've never liked this exotic because trying to make use of its perk feels cumbersome. It's an exotic that's supposed to work in the background, and I always try to use it very actively, especially when I'm playing the Code of the Devastator, Baby Hammer Bro. So linear actuators increases sprint speed. Sprinting builds up a static charge. After melee attacking an enemy, that charge will chain damage to nearby enemies. So let's make our way to another lost sector, and I'll talk about why I don't like it that much. Before we go into the lost sector, I'm just going to show off an activation of linear actuators. So let me just find some enemies. You'll see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, I have the linear actuators buff active. So if I punch something or hit something with my hammer, then it will chain lightning to nearby enemies. So let's throw it, and there we go. It zapped all the nearby enemies. So that's the premise of the exotic, and building around it for the Code of the Devastator. It gives you an AoE effect on your throwing hammer, because the biggest weakness of the throwing hammer is that it's single target, unlike the other shoulder charge abilities that you send them out and they do massive AoE damage. But the thing that I don't really like about linear actuators and the baby hammer is that I've always felt kind of weird about sprinting around to activate linear actuators. It feels like it takes just a little bit too long to activate, and another problem is I miss my hammer throws quite often, and that's a whole different issue. But in any case, let's get inside the lost sector and just kind of flow with this again and see how it feels. Here's the thing about linear actuators and the Code of the Devastator. I don't like using the baby hammer as a primary means of damaging and fighting with enemies. I like to use it as a supplement to my damage output, because stuff like this happens when I'm using it as the primary means of my damage output. I throw it out and I miss the target, and then I just feel bad. But I suppose linear actuators and the throwing hammer has great value if you can get really good at placing the hammer and always hitting something with it. Like right there, I missed. And that feels bad. That destroyed my momentum. I was rocking and rolling, moving and grooving, and all the momentum kind of stops when I miss the target, and that's a bit unfortunate. But I think that there's definitely a value in having that little bit of AoE damage attached to the throwing hammer. But it's a playstyle shift. A lot of times for exotics, for me, I just don't like them to completely overpower the base level playstyle that you're supposed to have when you play Destiny. It's a first person shooter at its core, and this setup turns the Titan into throwing hammer simulator, which is cool. Like, that's kind of cool, right? There's something about that. And it is satisfying. I'm not going to lie. I'm enjoying it right now. But depending on the content that I'm going into, I can't see this being as effective. Like, I imagine if I were to go into a 980 Nightfall and I tried this, the enemies would laugh in my face and destroy me instantly. But in other environments, like right now, just in a lost sector, I am doing pretty well. So maybe for the sake of experimentation, I should take this into a different environment. More to the point that I was trying to make, though, the main reason I don't like linear actuators and the baby hammer is that it is asking me to engage with a playstyle that is a bit dangerous. So normally when I'm using the Code of the Devastator and the baby hammer, I only throw it in situations where I know it's safe for me to retrieve it. But because I have linear actuators, I feel like I'm supposed to be throwing it a hell of a lot more often so that I can trigger the effects of linear actuators. And I've already kind of overextended myself, so let's just push back and get into cover, and I can use the throwing hammer to heal myself by picking it up. And that's unfortunate. Well, look, I think it's pretty clear at this point that I don't like using the Dunemarchers, but there is a certain fun that can be had when you're using them and you're using them well. But it feels like an exotic and a playstyle that is much too dangerous to be effective in the same way that Capris Horn can be effective. Even though Capris Horn is really gimmicky, it's very strong. But the linear actuators, it's strong, but not as strong, and it's even more gimmicky than the Capris Horn. Okay, we're back inside the K1 Communion, the lost sector that I was in before with the Dunemarchers that I didn't finish, and now I'm using the Heart of Inmost Light. It has a very lengthy description for its exotic perk, and it's very powerful, and it's got some great synergies with the Code of the Devastator. So, using an ability, grenade, melee, or barricade, empowers the other two abilities. Empowered means abilities have faster regen, melees and grenades do more damage, and barricades have more hit points. So, what that means is when we activate our barricade, our grenade and melee ability do more damage, and they recharge faster. Now, the cool thing about the empowered effect is that it can stack in certain ways. So there are certain combinations of ability activations that will allow you to get empower ×2. So if I activate my barricade and then throw my hammer, then I get empowered ×2, and then my grenade does 86,000 damage. That's a lot. Now, another really cool thing about empower that I absolutely love with the Code of the Devastator is that if I throw my hammer and for whatever reason I can't pick it up, it's just out there and it's going to blow up in a couple of seconds. There we go. It's gone. Now what I can do is activate my barricade to speed up the cooldown of my hammer. So I'll have it back very soon. And that is a huge quality of life for the Code of the Devastator, because the hammer is everything. And whenever I'm playing with something like the Dunemarchers with linear actuators, or even the Capris Horn, and I don't have a lot of strength on my armor, when I lose that hammer, I'm waiting a little bit over a minute to get the hammer back. And that just stinks because this is such a core part of the gameplay of the subclass. Especially when you're in an environment where there are a lot of major enemies, where it's nice to have something that you can just chuck out and instantly destroy them. But the empowered plus roaring flames ×3 is very nice as well. That's 27,000 damage we get from a single hammer throw. That's more than enough to kill, or at least severely wound, an orange bar enemy, or even a boss level enemy. And then those grenades, if I throw them out while they're empowered, they just do insane amounts of damage. It feels very nice. Okay, we are almost done with the messing around that we're doing, the theory crafting, if you will. And the last exotic armor piece that we're going to use is the Synthoceps. The exotic perk Biotic Enhancements increases our melee lunge range, and it improves melee and super damage when surrounded by enemies. So this is mostly, for me, gonna get used to improve the damage dealt by the super. And I want to show that off on the boss. So once we get into the lost sector, then we can use it there. But the biggest difference between the Synthoceps for me and something like the Heart of Inmost Light is that it comes without the safety net of the Empower. So if I mess up one of my hammer throws, I'm not going to be able to get it back. So depending on the environment that I'm in, I'm going to be a lot more conservative about how I throw it. So like if this was a Nightfall, I wouldn't be able to throw my hammer and kind of freely just go pick it up, because these acolytes would rip me to shreds. Same thing with that knight. But because we're just in a lost sector, I can still be kind of goofy and run around and just punch everything to death and not worry about dying. And, you know, despite the fact that the throwing hammer, when you pick it up, it heals you, it's not a foolproof heal, because it is a regeneration. So you don't get a fixed amount of health, or at least you don't get a massive amount of fixed health when you pick it up. You get a small amount of health when you pick it up. So when using the Synthoceps, you definitely have to be a bit more careful about how you place your throws, because you don't, especially if you don't have a lot of strength, you're not going to be able to get that hammer back for about a full minute, and that's unfortunate. The beauty of this subclass for me is having a melee ability available for all the situations when I absolutely need it. So in this lost sector, there is a wizard that spawns after I kill enough acolytes. So what I want to do is set myself up for it. I want to get Roaring Flames ×3 up and running before the wizard comes out, so that when it is out, I can throw a hammer at it, throw a grenade at it, and it just gets absolutely destroyed. Now we've got Roaring Flames ×3. The wizard should come out. There it is. And one hit took away most of its shields and its health, made it finishable. That's all we could ask for, really. That's kind of the perfect implementation of the throwing hammer. It's not necessarily about killing every single enemy with the hammer. It's about saving it for those high priority targets, making sure Roaring Flames is ready when you absolutely need it. So we're going to do the same thing again over at this next area. Oh, there it is. Oh, well, that was pretty big. Oh, I had Biotic Enhancements that time, so the hammer did more damage. It was enough to one-shot the wizard in here. So that's pretty nice. Unfortunately, didn't have Biotic Enhancements there, but still, the damage from Roaring Flames just makes it so nice. The ability to go in and basically completely destroy the wizard before it can even get an attack off. It feels really nice. Okay, so now what I would like to do is trigger Biotic Enhancements and then smash this guy. Yeah, I mean, that worked pretty well. I picked up an unstable essence there, and that helped my damage output a little bit, but still, the super feels good when you've got all these different damage buffs applying to you at the same time. You've got the Biotic Enhancements, Roaring Flames ×3. It's very cool. After all of that, if I had to pick an exotic that I enjoy using the most for both efficiency reasons and for usability reasons, it's definitely going to be the Heart of Inmost Light, because the ability to correct for my dumbass mistakes, like throwing my hammer off of ledges and stuff like that, is incredible. And the empower effect is really nice as well. It gives a very, very, very consistent and powerful neutral game to Decode the Devastator and any Titan subclass that's wearing it. But with that in mind, a close second, even though it's super gimmicky and it doesn't seem like it's meant to be taken seriously, the Capris Horn is a lot of fun and it's freaking powerful, dude. The shockwave that comes out, because it can trigger roaring flames, feels really nice. And then when you attach a mod like bomber or distribution or whatever to your class item, then you've got something that's really effective. So the Heart of Inmost Light is the #1 slot for me for the Code of the Devastator. The Capris Horn #2. Synthoceps #3, not because it's any weaker than either of those two, but just because for me, it's more about the super activation, and I tend to enjoy exotics that improve neutral game more than I enjoy exotics that improve super. And then at the bottom of the list is definitely the Dunemarchers. The way that the Dunemarchers ask you to play in order to make use of the linear actuators exotic perk is just not practical most of the time. And even in the situations where you can run around and constantly trigger its effects, it feels inconvenient to be like, okay, there's two guys here, let me sprint for a second to trigger linear actuators, then let me try to hit my hammer. It always feels inconvenient to me. That's probably a preference thing, because I know I've known and read a lot of people on Reddit that like the linear actuators exotic, but it's not for me. It's definitely not for me. So, and there we go. That's going to do it for the video today. We covered a lot of stuff about the Code of the Devastator and 4 different exotics. It's a lot to break down and process, but it does lay a good foundation for a build. I'm definitely going to make more videos like this one, but there are also going to be the more structured and curated build videos and exotic weapon reviews that you have come to expect on my channel, so stay tuned for all of that stuff. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support the channel more than you already do just by watching, liking, subscribing, and commenting, you can head over to patreon.com/iBluairJgR to become a patron. As always, the name of the game is Destiny 2, the name of the channel is iBluairJgR. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.